Okay, good afternoon. Committee on Judiciary and Hawai'i Affairs is called to order. It's Thursday, February 11th, 2 p.m., conference room 325. First bill on today's agenda is House Bill 1356 related to agriculture. First up is Office of State Planning, Ronnie Funakoshi and Aaron Setogawa.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Rodney Funakoshi, representing the Office of Planning. OP offers comments on this bill and stands on its written testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Phyllis Shimabukuro Geyser, Department of Agriculture.
Morris Sato, appearing on behalf of Phyllis Shimabukuro Geyser for the Department of Agriculture. The department stands on its written testimony expressing concerns as it applies to the Right to Farm Act. Thank you.
Zoom being reestablished, we will reconvene the meeting. Okay, Morris, there were no questions for you. We move on to House Bill 22 related to campaign finance. We have Gary Cam from the Campaign Spending Commission.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Commission submitted written comments. Commission basically recommends that no changes be made to 11-391 and 11-393. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is all the testifiers we have scheduled to appear before us today. Members, any questions? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Question to campaign spending. Is the reason why the fines have to be higher is because there's so many people violating this, or because you want to draw attention to be $1,000 per violation?
Yeah, so this is not a campaign spending commission bill, so I don't know the reason why this bill was introduced.
So whether it was good or bad or otherwise, that's not your immediate concern then?
Well, if you read our comments, we recommend that no changes be made. I don't think the commission believes that there is a problem with the current fine setup in 11-391. And as far as 11-393, the commission has never had a chance to apply that law yet. And I will note that the commission does have does have the authority to fine up to $1,000, which is what the bill is aiming for. So I think I don't think there should be any room for dissatisfaction with 11-393 simply because we haven't had a case involving that section.
So you could say there's a bit of redundancy, or the bill may not necessarily be needed.
I don't think the bill is needed. I think the fine structure right now is sufficient. And I think keeping the fine, the maximum fine under 391 at 5,000 is better than the 25% of the cost of the ad. And I say that because although the bill increases the fine from 25 to, I believe, $150, if you're talking about Facebook advertising or other social media that costs $50 or $75, 25% of that is not going to give you the hope for increase in fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. House Bill 157. Jennifer Brooks or Cheryl Kakazu Park?
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Brooks from OIP. I'm going to stand on our written testimony offering comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, that's the only testifier we had scheduled for this bill. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. House Bill 570. Related to sexual abuse of a minor. Yeah. Karan Ilagaki, Attorney General's Office.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Karen Inagaki, Deputy Attorney General. We've submitted written testimony, so I'm just going to be very brief and highlight a few of our points. While we obviously understand that victims of child sexual abuse may need additional time in order to be ready to file a lawsuit or even talk about it, we do want to point out that the longer the time is, that the more evidentiary problems that could arise. And we are facing that actually in our office right now, where we have cases where the perpetrator has passed away, there are no records and there are no witnesses. So we just want to point that out, that is a concern. The other points that we pointed out in our testimony was that in the new subsection E, we would recommend that on page 7, lines 1 through 2, that because best practices for trauma-informed response training may change over time, and also mental health professionals may feel that training requires different approaches within different contexts, that if we could change includes, which seems to limit it to those enumerated elements, that we change it to may include, and then that will provide some flexibility in the training. And finally, on page 5, lines 18 through 20, we would ask that because this bill was before the electronic filing rules were in place, that we add that they shall be electronically filed under seal and remain confidential. And those are our only comments. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kara Jabola Corollas. State Commission on the Status of Women. Not on. Michael Golush, GLTB Caucus of the Democratic Party.
Aloha, Chair. Michael Galoyu, appearing on behalf of the LGBT Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We stand in support of this bill. We do ask that the statute of limitations be not 50 years, but remove the statute of limitations entirely. We have full faith in our legal system that they'll be able to overcome the hurdles that the previous testifier went to. We've seen it happen in other jurisdictions back on the continent, and we believe that the legal system will be able to handle those problems that arise from this. It should not. The perpetrators of childhood sex abuse should not be able to get one over on the system just because the clock runs out. We definitely need, they should be given every opportunity to seek justice with our legal system, especially since we've seen over the time that organizations from the Roman Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts of America, and Kamehameha schools doing things to block such investigations and suppressing survivors of childhood sex abuse from coming forward. So on that note, we do thank you for hearing this bill. We encourage you to pass it out, and we again respectfully ask that you amend it to remove the statute, the 50-year statute, and make it unlimited. All righty, thank you and aloha.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Patricia Medina Talbert Law.
Yes, mahalo, Chair Nakashima and members of the committee. I would like to respond to the Attorney General's comment, but first, let me just say, Milalani Trask and I have submitted written testimony. We stand behind it. We would now like to focus the committee on a specific concern in HB 570 as amended. If you refer to subsection B, there is a clause in the existing law which frustrates what we believe is the intent of the legislature. Let me give you the exact example. Let us say a church, a school, a community organization takes our children off island to participate in an athletic event, a scholastic competition, a cultural moment. And while that child is there, a kumu, a coach, a chaperone of the legal entity sexually molests this child. When everybody returns to our state, at least one court has held you cannot hold the predator and the legal entity responsible because the sexual abuse occurred outside our state. HB 570 as amended seeks to correct and close that loophole because again, we believe the intent of the legislature was to protect our children. And in all fairness, it does add a phrase that says the victim must be a resident of our islands. To put a human face on this, one victim who is now an adult has said, I did not have a choice about where it happened, but I must live every day with what happened. And if I have time, Chair, I would like to just comment very briefly about the Attorney General's concern about the difficulty in litigating these cases. Well, let me just pursue that. The fact that it may be difficult to litigate does not mean we should take away the opportunity for a victim to seek justice. In fact, in the penal code in Hawaii, we have certain crimes that have no statute of limitations. So the Attorney General's office is grappling with cases, murder, for example, that these cases, they may be difficult to litigate, but in the interest of justice, we keep the statute open. Thank you very much for listening, and we do support the reporting out of 570 as amended.
Thank you very much. Cindy Shimomi Saito, Sex Abuse Treatment Center.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Cindy Shimomi Saito, Executive Director of the Sex Abuse Treatment Center. We stand on our written testimony that we submitted with an amendment, and we stand in strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that is all the testifiers we have scheduled to come before us today.
That's not true. I asked to testify. I'm sorry, Chairman, but I live in Michigan and I put my testify in yours and ask to have a verbal testification. I'm sorry.
And your name is?
Cheryl Hauk.
Cheryl, sorry, I do stand corrected. Please proceed.
I wanted to start out by saying mahalo to Chairman Nakashima and honored committee members. The last 5 years, I've traveled to Hawaii from Michigan to testify on bills very much like this in front of your Judiciary Committee and other committees. And I do appreciate you putting it on Zoom, and thank you for letting me do this in a time of COVID and things. I am a victim of childhood sexual abuse from a close relative my entire childhood in Hawaii. I was controlled and threatened all 18 years, physically, emotionally, and sexually. I applaud the attempt to extend the statute of limitations, but I also don't think there should be an extension of just 50 years. There needs to be no limitations. I'm 58 years old, by the way. I find it painful also that the bill includes, and I'm quoting, these reasons range cognitive development, limited capacity, inability to recognize sexual abuse, confusion about feelings, and limited ability. The Attorney General's office has been wrong. I remember and even won a case. I fought my abuser as long as I could remember and fought the demons for 40 years after. And in these statements you make about victims not being cognitively developed or have the capacity pushes away the healing again. It makes them the victim. It makes me the victim. I kept quiet because I was consistently, and please listen, smothered with a pillow until I couldn't breathe, and I was threatened that if I ever told anyone, I would never breathe again. This fear lasted for 50 years. But I was born the year of the tiger, and I'm a Leo, and my abuser, well, he underestimated me. Thousands of victims are suffering from memories and experiences, from PTSD, from money it costs all of you to take care of them, including my brother in a group home. They're just not ready to come forward. And by the way, I do want to say to Carol, you're a prosecuting attorney. It would not be a civil case. I don't know why you would bring this up when you are criminal cases, not civil cases. And this is about civil cases. We might feel that it's wrong because our colleagues whisper about us. We might feel it's wrong because our churches condemn us because we come out, or even, as I did, fear death. I'm tired of playing nice and presenting my case over and over to this committee and to the legislator. I love Hawaii, but what are you afraid of? It's time to amend and pass this bill now. The Keikis need you, our Ohana need you, and I know that they will respect you for your commitment to them, unless you might be one of the perpetrators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now we have gone through the testifiers that were scheduled to be before us today. Members, are there any questions for the testifiers? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. House Bill 674 relating to electioneering communications. Gary Cam, campaign spending.
Good afternoon again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Gary Camp for the Campaign Spending Commission. We've submitted testimony in opposition to this bill. For now, I will just add that transparency in political spending will be greatly reduced if candidates are exempted from the requirement to file the Statement of Information for electioneering communication. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sandy Ma, common cause.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair of the committee. My name is Sandy Ma. I'm testifying for Common Cause Hawaii. You have our testimony before you. We also oppose HB 674 to limit statements of information for electioneering communications to just non-candidate committees, would not serve transparency and would reduce transparency during elections. So we hope you defer this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, that's all the testifiers we have on this measure. Any questions? Representative Nakamura.
I have a question for campaign spending. Mr. Cam, I was just wondering, as a candidate, I submit a candidate spending report based on the deadlines that are set by campaign spending. So all of the data on who I make payments to and how much I spent is reported based on your schedules and deadlines. So what I just don't, I never quite understood why is this secondary piece necessary? I'm just trying to understand the history of this electioneering report.
Yeah, well, I believe it's so that the public has more timely information on ads that are run 60 days before the general, 30 days before the primary. So it's limited to that time period when the ads are usually flying, and that so the reporting via the statement of information is more in line with when the ads appear, as opposed to disclosure reports, which come, for a period of time after the activity has occurred. This is not unlike your late contribution reports. Those are the contributions that are $500 or more that you receive between 4 and 14 days prior to the election. You're required to file the late contribution report on the third day before the election, and then the next report after that, those contributions have to be on the next disclosure report also. So it's a similar kind of concept.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay. Not then the chair does have a question. Mr. Cam? With regard to the electioneering report, because the candidates in the course of their campaign develop a plan for election, isn't the electioneering report providing the candidate's opponent with unfair advantage in terms of knowing the candidate's strategy for moving forward to win the campaign?
I've never run a campaign. That could very well be true, but I think it's a policy decision that you have to make here, which is what is more important: transparency in political spending, or keeping the strategies of a campaign unknown or hidden. I don't know how you'd put it. I guess they're competing policies. I would submit, though, that public transparency should be on top of that.
So public transparency is important, and that is assured by the candidate spending reports. However, in the case of electioneering, where it's non-candidate committees participating in the decision of the election, that is why the electioneering report becomes important there, because these can be unexpected or unsolicited information being utilized in a campaign against a candidate that and not by their opponent, but by a third-party organization.
You have a question?
Yeah, so is that fair that the third-party organization we have to report as opposed to the candidates themselves?
The non-candidate committees, they report via disclosure report and they report via statement of information for electioneering communications. I don't know what is unfair about that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
So if it's a candidate versus their opponent, then both of them are kind of on standing ground. They are working against each other in the election. However, these third-party entities come out of nowhere, and you can put millions of dollars into the campaign for or against a candidate of their choosing. And that's why it's important that they be held to a higher standard of reporting than the candidate themselves.
You mean more reporting?
Yes.
You know, I suppose one could come to that conclusion, but I don't believe that that is the commission's position. Commission believes that it is important for both committees, non-county committees, county committees, individuals spending their own money, the whole universe of how person is defined in 11-302. The commission believes that it is important that all of those persons file the statement of information.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Camp. Members, any other questions? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Camp, continuing on that same dialogue, my understanding was after seeing how much work this created for you, examples where I would go through some campaign reports and I would see a $7.95 posting for a Facebook ad or something that, you know, was really not too significant, but I know the law says now it's got to be part of a $2,000 one. Wouldn't it be easier for you guys if it was a substantial ad or a substantial piece of electioneering rather than, you know, an Instagram that costs or a Facebook thing that costs? I just thought that you guys were going to come up with some stuff to make it easier for you. Maybe this is not the bill, but couldn't you make it easier by just saying, okay, if you got an ad that's worth more than $500 or $1,000 or $2,000, which have an impact, as the chair said, you know, the big boys come in and they play with big money, and it treats the small guy in the same vein for this reporting. That's a question.
Well, the way the law is written right now, you have to first spend at least $2,000. So that in itself is not insignificant.
But that's the cumulative. In other words, all of these $7.95 Facebook ads or $25 ones, they have to add up to that 2,000. But since people don't know that it's going to be added up to 2,000, they report it to you otherwise so many days ahead of time. That's my whole point. It makes you guys work a lot to see if we've met the letter of the law. So wouldn't it be easier just to start saying if you do any ad for a certain amount, then you have to report it, versus these Manini ones that add up to $2,000 after a whole series of events?
Will it be easier? I'm not sure if it will be easier. The work will still be there. And I don't know if making the work easier is what we're tasked with. We just implement the law. So, you know, without going through election season of only targeting as it costs a certain amount, I can't tell you if that would be easier. And I don't know what you mean by easier, that we spend less time on electioneering communications, or it's less complicated.
for your staff not to add up the 795s and looking at every report in such detail. But if you guys are okay with that, hey, I have no problem with it. But right now it seems a little bit overzealous in the sense that, hey, you small guys, you spend $795 or $29.95, report all that because we're not sure if it's going to go to 2,000 versus the big boys come in and roll over with really big bucks and it's under the same ground rules.
Well, you know, I appreciate the discussion, Representative Ward, but that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at the complete exemption of candidate committees when filing the statement of information. I mean, if you guys want to talk about how can we make things easier by adjusting when what amounts have to be filed or the threshold amounts being raised, then you know we can have that discussion. But this bill is not.
And I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, this one takes us all out of it, but I would think that it would be some compromise in between that versus taking us all out of it versus going in the way we were before.
Right. I believe you will see other bills this session that will do that.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. Cam. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Any other questions? Okay, then if not, we will move on to the next bill. HB 63 related to non-general funds. Tommy Amachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Not present. Okay, well, that is the only testifier we have on this particular measure, members. I guess we will move on then. House Bill 569 related to victim counselor privilege. Department of Human Services. Jennifer Rose, University of Hawaii.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair. Jennifer Rose, UH Office of Institutional Equity. I'm speaking on behalf of VP Govea. We stand on our testimony in support of this bill, and I will be available to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, that's the last testifier we have scheduled for this particular measure. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. House Bill 526 relating to procurement. Panikahakui State Procurement Office. Oh, I'm sorry. Kurt Otoguro, Department of Accounting and General Services.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, and members of the committee. Kurt Otoguro, State Comptroller. The Department of Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony in opposition of the language of HB 526. HD1. I would say, however, that the department is not against obviously improving procurement for past performance. We believe that a lot of the procurement code does in fact already allow for the consideration of past performance. And we need to work closer to define that, to eliminate the subjectivity that's in the process so that we can get to a more objective rating system. And then, of course, the whole idea is to do enforcement
and be stronger with the contractors and vendors that we utilize across state projects. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Otoguro. Director of Transportation, Jade Butai. Not present. Okay, that's all the testifiers we have scheduled to appear before us on this particular measure. Members, any questions? Okay. Seeing none, I will move on to House Bill 541. Relating to health. First, we have Behavioral Health Administration, Department of Health.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, Eddie Mercero, Behavioral Health Administration, Department of Health. We stand in super duper strong support of this measure. We really believe that it's a good step towards more transparency and coordination of funding for behavioral health resources and being able to more effectively leverage the resources that we have in a more coordinated way. And stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mercero. Alan Johnson, Hawaii Substance Abuse Coalition.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. Thank you for the opportunity. We provided comments with recommendations. We support the overall intent of the bill. Our two recommendations, we stand on them. The first one is we like what the Senate did with their amendments, and I list them in there, what they did and how they combined two bills and changed some of the wording. We thought that was really a good improvement. And then second, our recommendations we list there is we like to put in there that some of the overarching goals of payment reform is to hold to evidence-based practices. We just feel if we're going to do payment reform, let's make sure we get some overarching goals about making sure we still follow research and science and best practices. And with that, we stand on our testimony. And thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. Colette Masunaga, Queens Health System.
Aloha, Chair. JC Michaelonic on behalf of Queens Health Systems. We'll stand on our written testimony supporting the intent in the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, that's all the testifiers we have scheduled for this particular measure. Any questions? Representative Nakamura.
I have a question for Ed Mercero.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Ed. Just
Hi.
wanted to ask you the Hawaii Substance Abuse Coalition had a couple of suggested amendments to this bill. I was wondering whether you had a chance to review those amendments and what your thoughts were.
No, Rep, I have not, unfortunately. I feel like I've been playing catch up this whole session. But I'd be willing to discuss those with Mr. Johnson and see if we can come up with some language that would be suitable for all of us. I am a little bit, I just want to clarify that this measure is not intended necessarily for payment reform, although payment reform may be a result of this measure. This measure is really directed towards figuring out, getting a better handle on who's paying what for whom and for what services. So I'll give you just an example. We have, when we inventory our contracts across just BHA, we have many providers who have upwards of 15 contracts across all 4 of the divisions in BHA for very similar, if not identical services. And then if you expand that out to other payers, state payers, such as the judiciary, public safety, DHS, et cetera, you start to see that a lot of the funds that are going towards services are related and in some cases duplicative. And so the goal for this is to really start to kind of narrow the payment streams so that we can maximize the limited actually resources that we do have. Oh,
Thank you for the clarification.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, then we'll move on. House Bill 545 related to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. William Myla, DHHL.
Chair, we stand on our testimony and support. With comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. And that is all the testimony we have scheduled for this particular bill. Members, any questions? Representative Ward.
DHHL, please. This bill requests the digitization or requires the digitization by a certain date, like July 1, 2022. The question is, what percentage of your records presently are digitized, and how much do you have to go to fulfill this bill if it passes? Are you there?
Thank you for the question. So at this time, basically in terms of digitization, our records are, I think when the proponent of this bill first introduced it, the neighbor islands didn't have access to this information. And so having these records available to neighbor islands has addressed that issue at least. But keep in mind that our records are always in flux. What I mean by that is when people transfer their leases, or if they designate, you can designate a successor at any time. So those records have to be constantly updated. It's not as static as if it doesn't change over time. So that's part of the process in keeping that current, as well as, with all due respect, we do have the Kalima case as an example where there's a lot of documents, responses that need to be filed. And so our limited staff is often pulled to many different needs, I guess, to address those issues. So I think we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have. But we are facing a hiring freeze, and we're with what we have, the system can function to what it needs to right now. Can it be improved? Absolutely. And the department is very open to whatever mechanism would assist with improving that that availability.
When you mentioned transferring of lease, or speaking of transferring of leases, when you do that, do the leases also get recorded in the Bureau of Conveyances, or is it only at the DHHL offices? Mr. Ayla, I see you.
Yes. Sorry, you're for some reason we cannot hear you very well. So if you could please speak up.
Okay, more into the microphone through my double mask. Mr. Ayla, the question was,
what was the question?
It was, given, is it really that hard? You don't want me to go louder than this?
No, I can. And at the same time that I'm taking the question, we're trying to sign in with another system. So by all means, go ahead.
A double Zoom. Okay, I'll make it quick. Speaking of the transfer of leases, do you also transfer your leases and record them at the Bureau of Conveyances, or is it just at DHHL headquarters?
Homestead leases are recorded at DHHL. Commercial leases are recorded at the Bureau of Conveyance.
Okay, but the ones that are recorded at DHHL, are those digitized, or is that something that this bill speaks directly to? And the question earlier, which I don't believe I got an answer to, is what percentage of your records now are digitized versus how far you got to go, given if this bill passes?
We're in the process of trying to digitize them all. We have a very old system, and we have records that go back, 70, 80 years. specifically with regards to the recording of our leases. I do not believe they're digitized at this point. It is certainly one of our desires to do so, but with competing financial responsibilities, you know, it's not at the top priority right now.
Mr. Eila, you shouldn't be embarrassed, because I can remember in the Finance Committee, DOE was saying that they had payroll on 3x5 cards for their teachers just a number of years ago, and they're just kind of getting on board. So this bill will be very helpful for you to digitize, or is the time frame a little bit too tight for you?
I'm sorry, we're going between. There we go.
You can't hear? Okay, I yield to an offline question later on. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. 972, related to contested case. Annual Order Necker, Land Use Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We stand on our written testimony with comments. There are a few things that this bill does that we feel need to be amended for the safety of the commissioners and the commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. William Ila, DHHL.
Aloha, Chair. We stand on our testimony in support.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's the only testifiers we have scheduled for this particular measure. Members, any questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to the next bill, HB 103, related to emergency powers. Luke Meyer, FEMA? No, HAIMA.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Luke Myers. I'm the administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. We appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 103. HAIMA opposes the testimony as presented, and we are available for further discussion as necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, we have other testimonies in support and with comments and in opposition, but we have nobody further appearing before us. Any questions for Mr. Meyer?
Sure.
Representative Ward.
Luke, could you elucidate on why you're against the bill, please?
Yes, sir. In reviewing this legislation, the proposed legislation, the amendment to 127A14, we believe it limits the authority of the governor during emergency and the mayors, and we stand on the existing criteria that's identified under 127 for an emergency and the periods that are identified.
Has any of that happened so far? Or is this the inserting of the legislature into this the problem that you have?
There's a state emergency management structure that is identified under 127, and we feel that this will limit the authority of that structure that's identified within 127.
Can you give an example of that?
127A14 includes a proviso that would allow the governor to extend a declaration of state of emergency. And what we feel by the changes that are being inserted here limits the authority of the governor to a certain amount of time period as identified in the markup of 127. As we have seen in any incident in an emergency, They can be flight fluid. And with the authority under 127 of the governor and or the mayors, we believe that authority should be vested there, just for overall continuity of an incident, sir.
You know, if we were just gearing up for the pandemic, I would say, yeah, we've got to really pile on and make sure that everything goes according to a very top-heavy, top-down system. But I would think as we phase out, this bill would be more to the making of, hey guys, let's spread out the decision making rather than just in a couple of people, some of which are not even elected. Did you see the point of the zeitgeist, the spirit of the moment? We're trying to get out of the pandemic and we're loosening it up, and you're saying, hey, keep it tight or make it tighter. You see the perspective on that?
Yes, sir. I do acknowledge with any of the incidents that we have here in the state, traditionally there is an after action report and an improvement plan from those. We are currently working on an improvement plan for an interim for the first 9 months of this incident that we will be sharing. And then obviously once the pandemic instant stabilization occurs, hopefully in 2021, there'll be a further after action report. And at that time, it would be prudent to relook at 127 across the board. We've had numerous legislative recommendations so far during this session. And I think through best practices, we would wait till the incident's over to make any of those changes to the structure, sir.
Was that a prediction? You said 2021, it'll be over? Or
in my job, we don't predict when disaster ends. We just support coordination, sir.
even the weatherman is half the time accurate. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very diplomatic. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, then we move to House Bill 726, relate to face covering. James Tabe, Office of the Public Defender.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is James Tabe. I'm with the Office of the Public Defender, and OPD stands on its written testimony in support of this bill, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Iris Ikeda, DCCA.
Aloha, Chair and members of the committee. We stand in our testimony offering comments on this bill. We do ask for an amendment to paragraph 8 on page 2, lines 11 through 13 to clarify that our financial institutions want customers to wear face coverings while they're in the institutions and only momentarily remove those face coverings to verify the transactions, since they are they need to verify that the transactions are happening to the account holder. And I'm available for questions. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you very much. Luke Myers, Haima.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Luke Myers. I'm the Hawaii Emergency Management Administrator. Haima stands on House Bill 726 offering comments. We do have one friendly amendment. The original bill for 726 before it became HD1 did not include a provision that would repeal after a certain time period. We do acknowledge that HD1 does have that now, but we stand in offering comments and are available for discussion as necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope Johnson, Hawaii County Assembly.
Aloha. I'm testifying today in opposition to this bill. I have traveled around the island and I've been talking with business owners and managers and employees, people who are wearing the mask all day long, people who are sweating on their jobs. Some of them are in the back cooking, running around. People are struggling under these masks. They're dealing with all kinds of different health issues. First thing that comes up is some tiredness, some dizziness, okay, sweating on the mask. People are getting rashes on their face. People are quitting their job because of dental issues. A lot of dentists have come forward and said, hey, our patient base is getting really bad teeth and gums now because they're breathing in this carbon dioxide, too much carbon dioxide all day long. There's been neuroscientists who said that the long-term effect of wearing masks results in permanent unreversible brain damage. Okay, so looking around, it looks like we're kind of walking around killing ourselves, getting this idea that we are safer with a mask when scientific studies of higher quality than the ones that the CDC has put out say that there's no difference between wearing a mask. And in fact, there's also studies showing that when you walk around with a mask on, you get way less oxygen and more carbon dioxide than what's officially recognized as safe. If you stick a carbon dioxide meter up your mask, put it anywhere in your mask, the alarm's gonna go off immediately, okay? Also have a written testimony, and so take the written testimony into account, and then I added some stuff about going around and talking with the businesses on my oral testimony.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lauren Zerbo, Hawaii Food Industry Association.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFIA. We've submitted comments with requested amendments. With these amendments, the bill will empower businesses to implement the necessary safety protocols without making the mistake of forcing employees to take on the role of law enforcement or making businesses liable for the actions of individual customers. HFIA would be happy to support this measure with these amendments. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Colette Masunaga, Queens Health System.
Aloha, Chair JC Mike on behalf of Queens Health Systems. We stand in support of HB 726 and appreciate the committee's attention to this important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Angela Keene, Hawaii Quarantine Kapu Breakers.
Aloha mai kako. Can you hear me? Aloha
Yeah.
mai kako. I am Angela Keene. Want to thank you, Honorable Chair Nakashima, Chair Matayoshi, or Vice Chair Matayoshi, for allowing my group to testify. I'm with Hawai'i Quarantine Kapu Breakers. As policymakers, you know that anytime you add exceptions to the rules or laws, that people find ways to break them. And while we do stand in support of this bill, we would like to ask you to remove the 6-foot rule. We know that the UK variant is in the headlines. Dr. Fauci says double masking is key because the variant is more transmissible. At this point, we don't know if it's more virulent. And we're not physicians. CDC makes those kinds of studies and rules. So why place the 6-foot rule if it could change at any time in the future? What if the CDC says 10 feet? We know that Hawaii News Now said in the headlines yesterday, Lynn Kawano, that 70% of the people who got their vaccine didn't get the second shot. So masks are the one thing that can stop this virus and keep tourism industry workers safe and keep our state open and keep our visitors coming. We have 6,700 members across Hawaii in my group. And every day I get dozens of complaints from workers in the tourism industry, in the airlines, all over. And what they say to me is that people come here and they have no idea that we have a mask mandate that's statewide. They're not told about it on the airplane. They're not told about it, or they don't see any notes in the hotel room. Today, the mayor and Mufi Hanneman put up signs along Kalakaua Avenue. That's a start. But people really need to know that this is to protect our citizens, to protect our tourism industry. So I strongly recommend that you consider removing the 6-foot rule for masks as it is a loophole used for those who are anti-maskers. See Mayor Victorino's public health emergency rule that was effective January 19, 2020. He did it right. It outlines mask usage on public sidewalks, hiking trails, in parks, in similar areas, unless actively engaged in strenuous outdoor physical activity, provided adequate distance and physical distancing both possible and practiced. So I conferred with one of the nation's top epidemiologists, Dr. DeWolf Miller, who lives here in Honolulu. He agrees with this, removing the 6-foot rule. Simply put the mask on before, while leaving the house. It's not necessary if you're traversing to the beach or going in the water or surfing. But to keep our workers safe, to keep our Hawai'i open, I implore you to remove the 6-foot rule. So we stand on our testimony, and I'm here for any answers and questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Victor Lim, Hawaii Restaurant Association.
Hi, Kung Hei Fa Choi, Chair of Nakashima Matayoshi and members of the committee. Happy Chinese New Year. The Hawaii Restaurant Association, representing 3,500 restaurants here, supports the intent of the bill to provide a clear and consistent statewide mandate for face coverings to slow the spread of COVID-19. And HRA would like to also support the comments made by the HFIA about making sure that the language is there so that the businesses do not end up being the policeman dealing with the unruly customers. We already doing all the things like signage, decals, informing customers about the requirements, protocols, sanitation station, seating layouts. We have done anything and everything that the CDC and the state has recommended for us to do. And we just want to thank you for this opportunity to testify in your committee. Aloha.
Thank you very much. Next, Tina Yamaki, Retail Merchants of Hawaii. M. Marozo, Aloha Festival. Okay. Anuhea Maeda, individual.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Anuhea Maeda, and I strongly oppose this bill. It's based on the assumption that mask wearing is in fact effective in curbing the spread of the virus. But I would be interested to know what studies the legislature is basing this off of to back up this decision. Because prior to this pandemic, mask wearing was only reserved for medical centers, hospitals, or people that were sick. Why are we now forcing healthy people to behave like sick people? We also would have to assume that asymptomatic spread is the drivers of this pandemic, and there has been numerous studies that have said asymptomatic spread is not the driver of the pandemic. Even Dr. Fauci of the CDC himself is quoted saying that. And also, we've had this mask mandate implemented since like March, or a very long time. And according to the Hawaii Health website, it says that there's 88% of people in Hawaii have been compliant, like properly wearing their mask compliant, 88%, and still the virus spreads. So I think it's unrealistic to think that if we have 100, the 12% that are not super compliant are the ones spreading the virus, because this virus is so microscopic. It's smaller than you can't even see it through a regular microscope. Of course, it's going to go through a mask. So it's unrealistic to think that we are stopping the spreading of a virus from simply mask wearing. Also, these masks, they unfairly prohibit people who have other issues like respiratory issues. People are so afraid of this virus, even if they have respiratory illnesses and they shouldn't be wearing the mask, they wear it anyway because everybody is so angry and judgmental of them. They're afraid of the angry judgment, so they suffer through it. And so and I think we also need to keep in mind that the number of deaths, while any deaths is not good, but the number of deaths due to this virus is significantly less than the number of deaths from any other cause in our state. In fact, there were 288 deaths in the state of Hawaii last year, 2020, according to covidtracking.com. And according to our state website, 11,798 people died last year. That means that the number of deaths due to COVID were only 2.4%. So if we're being careful about deaths and stuff, there's 97.6% of other causes of death that's killing more people, yet we're going to start criminalizing people who have read other studies. There are numerous other studies that have, maybe there's a CDC has their studies, but there are other studies that say that masks are not effective in changing the spread of this virus. So it'd be good to keep both sides considered, and then criminalizing those who don't agree is really unfair and biased on those who are doing their own research separate from what the CDC says, because there are other experts besides the CDC. And I just urge you in just moving forward that you would keep in mind that it also mask wearing, it's children should not be covered in masks. I mean, imagine if we had done this a year ago and the child walked into a building with a mask on, we'd be like horrified because you can't see its identity. And it makes it easier for people to steal children, or for children to not even know how to relate to humans because they can't see their faces. So I think it's important to remember when it comes to health, it's more than just physical, it's also emotional, psychological, and spiritual. And when you're putting these masks on, it's making these really hostile environments. People just hate you if you're just not wearing a mask. And I think it's unhealthy for our community. It's also driving up fear, which drives up stress, which it breaks down your immune system, which also causes you to get sick. So if we're looking at the whole aspect of the health of our community and individuals, it would be good if we don't implement such a harsh mandate on people and take into consideration other aspects or other perspectives on this issue. So I strongly oppose this bill, and thank you for this chance to testify.
Okay, thank you very much. Lori Fibo Santiago.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I just want to testify. I've submitted a written testimony. I come from different aspects. I take care of my parents who are 83 years old, and I am raising 3 grandchildren. And I think putting this mandate and changing it into law of wearing the mask, I come from both sides. When you look at the amount of debt that we have, which I checked today, and up to date might be a little bit different depending on what may have taken place, we have only 423 deaths. I'm a type of person that I look at a glass, you have 2 types of people, half empty and half full. And I think sometimes we're so focused on putting on this numbers that so many people have been affected. So many people have the COVID-19, and we keep putting these numbers and they bring fear on people. And when you look at the numbers of the people who have been with COVID-19 and the amount of death that has taken place, it's very different in significance. It doesn't make sense for everything that we are asking the people to do and wearing masks. I have a granddaughter that is a year old that is afraid of people because they've kept her in her home. She didn't get to come out and see. So when she comes out and she sees people with a mask, I mean, can you imagine the long-term effect that no one's even considering that? I have another granddaughter who is healthy in school because she goes to a private school that requires masks. She plays sports. I'm now dealing with anxiety attacks with her, that she has to leave her classroom to go outside and breathe oxygen because she's having anxieties about this. I think that with the numbers that we have of people who are having COVID and the number of deaths, I think Hawaii is doing something right. That now I don't see the reason why we have to impose these mandates and make them into law and penalize people who are already suffering financially because we are in lockdowns for businesses. Restaurants aren't open full capacities and all that kind of stuff. So it's not really making sense on what we're putting the people through. And then we're dividing the people. I have respiratory problems. I have asthma. I've been denied entry into a store to do something, to buy groceries for my 83-year-old parents because I couldn't put on a mask that day because I was having a hard time breathing. It is like ridiculous. I'm trying to take care of 83-year-old parents to not go to the stores, to take care and do my duty for them, but I can't even go to the store. They told me that, tell us what you need and we'll shop for you. I'm sorry, I'm on fixed income. I don't know what even I'm going to buy for my family for dinner until I go into the store and see the prices. So how can somebody do my shopping for me? This is like, and then when you don't put the mask on or you're outside, it puts people one against another. What happened to the Aloha State? We are putting people one against another for a pandemic that I even question. You know, I always tell my husband, I believe that we're in a pandemic when I see the homeless population dropping like flies. I don't see that. I see the homeless pandemic even increasing because of the financial position that this has put onto the Hawaii Islands. So I question about this pandemic and if we're really in one, when you see the homeless people and they're not wearing masks and they're outside and they are not even affected by it. So to put this into law and to put more pressure on people and to start to make people more against one another, I think that that is a disservice to the Hawaii Islands, to our culture and the way of life. I think that where we are and what the people are doing, it is working. Not that 423 deaths and the deaths of these families aren't something significant, especially to each of the families who have lost, but to put the whole state of Hawaii, when we don't even do it for people with heart disease. We don't tell the restaurants, stop cooking in fat, stop putting sugar in your food because there's heart disease. So to put everybody in a mask for something that is not matching the numbers to what everybody is saying this is. People are recovering. So whatever we're doing right now is working. I don't think it has to be put into law and cause people to be in more of a predicament than what they are doing. It doesn't have to be a law. It's like the previous person saying 88% of the people are doing what they're supposed to do. So I don't think it has to be made a law. I don't think the people have to be fined. I think that we can get through this just as how we are doing in our projection. And I oppose this bill. I oppose to what it's doing to my grandchildren and the psychological effects that it is having on them with this mask mandate. I say, let the people breathe. Let the people breathe what's given to them. That's it for my testimony.
Thank you very much. Vasila Mitsiva. Oh, wrong with this. Hinai Tahon.
Hi, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for allowing us to testify on this bill. I live on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I strongly oppose this bill. And some things have already been covered already, and I just wanted to go over the studies that people are using to encourage using the masks. So the studies, even the ones on the CDC website, if you read them, they are inconclusive at best. They use observational studies, case control studies, and expert analysis, which if you look at the scientific standard of measurement, expert analysis is the most bottom one to go by because it is biased. Observational and cross-sectional studies are right just above it, but at the very bottom. What is the most gold standard of measurement are randomized controlled trial studies. And there have been, before March of 2020, for 40 years, there have been studies using randomized controlled trials to gauge whether or not using masks is effective in the transmission of viruses or anything like that. And if you look at those studies, all of them are statistically insignificant when it comes to finding out whether masks are effective or not in the transmission of viruses. If these are the CDC studies, these are the things that the governors, that the mayors, the health departments are all going by. But if you actually read those CDC studies, you're going to find that they are inconclusive at best, and they use the lowest level of scientific measurements for it. Another thing is that the reason for wearing the mask presumes that asymptomatic people are driving this virus. And Dr. Fauci himself said in January of 2020 that asymptomatic people do not drive viruses. The WHO came out in June 2020 saying that asymptomatic transmission is rare. They both redacted or retracted their claim, but they gave absolutely no evidence to support their retraction. The other presumption behind this bill is that SARS-CoV-2 is deadly to a vast majority of the population. And I'm going off of just CDC statistics, just so you know that this is where we're getting our information from, and this is what that website is saying. This is what this institution is saying. According to the CDC, people younger than the age of 19 have a recovery rate of 99.997% of this virus. Those from the ages of 20 to 39 have a recovery rate of 99.98%. Between the ages of 40 to 74, there's a 99.5% recovery rate. And from those 75% and on, there's a 94.6% recovery rate. Now, this is not to diminish those who have died from COVID, but this is just to show that the majority of the population will not be fatally affected by this virus. And I also wanted to say, I do have a stepson who attends a private institution as well. Okay. And when they are doing physical PE, they all have to wear masks. And I asked him, how is that to wear masks? And he says, a lot of the kids can't even finish with the games that they're playing or any activities. They all have to stop and pull down their noses and then try to breathe. But when they do that, a lot of the other kids are yelling at them to put their masks back on. So what are we doing to kids? I used to be a physical education instructor, I used to teach a lot of fitness classes. And the only reason you're wearing the mask is when you're trying to build up your cardiovascular system. And athletes, fighters, they do this because to build up their system, but they have a really hard time. A lot of them can't even complete their training because it takes away so much of their breathing. But we're making kids do this. And so I just wanted to say, those are the studies. If you want to look at them, they're very inconclusive. But I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to testify, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Madhava Shakti Mo.
Aloha. Thank you so much. My name is Madhava Shakti. I am submitting testimony to strongly oppose to any mandatory rules or any penalization on wearing masks. Wearing a mask should be solely voluntary and never penalized. Wearing a mask is a medical intervention, and if this bill is approved, it will violate our Constitution and our rights. I stand for freedom and for health. Well-documented research shows that our brain needs oxygen, and when we can't breathe in enough oxygen, there are cells in the brain that die, and so it is permanent damage, basically. The human body immune system requires full intake of oxygen to perform all its functions effectively. If someone wants to wear a mask, it's their choice. If they think they're being protected, then they're being protected, right? Why would I have to wear a mask if I'm healthy? No healthy individual should ever be forced to compromise their health by wearing a mask. This essentially violates human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lily Gavry.
Hi, I'm sorry, Gavry. Yes, I strongly oppose this as well, and a lot has already been said. I've submitted a written testimony. What I would like to add is that the studies and the doctors that are speaking out about the ineffectiveness of masks at preventing the transmission of COVID and other viruses, as well as the detrimental health effects, are being censored against our public forums and our social media platforms. So we're dealing with censorship. Sorry, I'm looking at my statement here for what else I would like to say. When the science is not conclusive, we don't get to pick and choose what to believe or enforce. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lenani Canberra. Not present. Philip Nasca. Okay. Goldie Wallingford. Okay. Jennifer Carmen. Not present. Okay, members, we've exhausted our list. Any questions? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start out some questions. First thing, there's never been a hearing like this before, at least in my experience, where freedom loving versus, health loving individuals. My question is to HFIA first. Are you still there? I forgot what
Yes,
name
I'm here.
you are.
This is Alexis Chapman for HFIA.
Yes. You said, hey, we don't want to be the mask police, and your amendment suggests that, look, all we have to do as businesses is tell people that hey, the law says you've got to wear it. Is your amendment the proper way of going about that, or should we say something else in the bill about private places of business?
I think our amendment encompasses what we were able to come up with within this measure that will, as I said, adequately allow businesses to enforce the safety protocols without making them inadvertently responsible for law enforcement. But of course, we would be happy to consider other suggestions for language that could accomplish that or provide additional protections for business.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair, I have one more question.
Okay.
The science has been kind of unfair to both sides, I guess, of this argument because it's changed so often. But my question is, who among the testifiers has a reasonable handle on what's going on in Hong Kong, Taiwan, New Zealand, and Australia, that with masks and social distancing, et cetera? In other words, is there a prophylactic better than a mask? I mean, I love freedom, but look, we've got to put this thing on the ash heap of history. So do any of you have any of the Australian, Taiwan, Hong Kong data that clearly they've almost beaten the thing down to, and they got millions of population. Hawaii's got higher cases and death toll than these places that got 20, 30 and upwards, millions of people. So somebody's doing something right that we are not doing. Does anyone care to comment on that? Or maybe my comment stands on its own?
I do. I care to comment on that.
Please do.
Yeah, the PCR test, there's plenty of evidence that those tests are bogus. They're giving false positives all the time. The president over in Nigeria had a goat and some fruit tested, and it all tests positive for COVID. So a lot of the people who are testing positive for COVID don't even really have any kind of symptoms or anything. And when they go to the hospitals for something else, these hospitals are encouraged, they've been encouraged to make them COVID no matter what they are. That's why the death rate's so low right now for the flu. Even people getting the flu. The flu is at the lowest level because everything's called COVID right now. So we have a certain way of doing business here in the US where we want, there's some kind of an agenda to ramp these things up. They've been ramped up, that's all. And all the deaths are being called COVID, except for, well, probably not all of them, but there's a lot more suicides because people are dealing with all of this pressure from COVID mandates. If we didn't have COVID mandates and we didn't have the media, we wouldn't even know this thing is going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, no follow up on the PCR test because that's kind of the most reliable that we've got. Are you talking about the brain tickler PCR or just the narrow, what do you call it, non-depth PCR? There's two kinds.
Chairman, I know I'm not here for this bill, but my daughter lives in Tokyo, and as you know, Japan has kept their numbers down pretty low compared to here on the mainland. And the reason they've done that is because as soon as there's a problem, they're all social distancing, masks. Every child has their hands washed as they go into school. And when someone is positive, they're tracing, extensive tracing. And I know that the people of Hawaii who have testified don't understand what's happening here. But I live in the Detroit area, and with all of those, our numbers have come down from 15,000 a day positive cases a day to today we had 905, or maybe that was yesterday, which seems high for you, and congratulations, but for us it's extremely low. And as a teacher, I'm going into high school with students. And the only way we can even hope to continue our economy and our education of our keikis is by masking, social distancing, and tracing extensively. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative McKelvey.
Is the public defender still on at all, or are they gone? Okay, never mind, Chair.
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. How would this, I'm looking at the exemptions, how would it work in real life? Like, for instance, the thought that comes into mind is somebody not wearing a mask and, an officer stops them on the street and says, hey, you're not wearing a mask. And the person goes, I have a medical condition. And does the officer then go, okay, where's your doctor's note? If they can't produce it or they can't produce proof, do they not write them a ticket, or do they write them the citation, and then it's up to the defendant to go to court and using, I guess, evidence show that they fall into one of the exemptions?
Basically, according to this bill, it would be a civil infraction. So under that system, if it's like a traffic ticket or a parking ticket, the defendant or the person who got the ticket can actually just write a written statement, probably throw in their medical certificate, and the judge will, they'll open up the envelope, they'll read the statement, look at the evidence.
They would still have to go through that legal process.
Right. Pretty much. But I think that the envelopes, it's even, I don't even know if it requires a stamp, but then they would look at it. If the judge denies it, doesn't believe it, the defendant can request a hearing date, and then they can present the evidence, and it'll be quick and simple. According to the way you have your system in the bill right now, as it is, if the officer gives you a ticket, you're gonna have to go to arraignment, you got to go through multiple court appearances and whatnot. So the way this bill is framed or is written, it wouldn't be that. It could be, and obviously, if the defendant can produce evidence right away, I would hope the police officer would use their discretion and not cite the person.
And these things would run in conjunction with the county. Because I know all the counties, like in Maui County, we have our own county mask. Right. This would run, I guess, in tandem with the county one.
I guess so. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Now we will move on to House Bill 724, relating to emergency management. Luke Myers, Haima.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Luke Myers. I'm the administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. AIMA stands on our testimony offering comments on House Bill 724. We are available for discussion as necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, that's the only testify we have scheduled for this particular bill. Any questions? Sensing none, we will move on. House Bill 467, related to public lands. Isaac Choi, Department of Taxation.
Yes, Chair. Jonathan White here on behalf of the Director of Tax. We just have some comments on this bill. I just want to highlight, I think we made a mistake in our testimony. Near the bottom, we asked for an effective date no earlier than January 1st, 2021. I believe we mean January 1st, 2022. Other than that, our testimony just makes a few comments. I'll be here for any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kevin Moore, DLNR.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Moore, DLNR Land Division. The department stands on its testimony in opposition of this measure. We oppose all parts except Part 4, which happens to be very similar to House Bill 1012 HD1, which is also on your agenda today. And I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, the only two testifiers we have scheduled to be before us today on this matter. Any questions?
A question for DLN.
Representative Nakamura.
Thank you. I have a question for DLNR for Mr. Moore.
Sure.
Hi. I just wanted to understand the nature of your opposition to this, the creation of the redevelopment authority. I'm not from the island, but I'm curious as to why you're opposed.
Okay, certainly. The gist of it is that we're already working on new leases for the Banning Drive area. So we're really focused on the application specifically to Banning Drive. And we have done an RFP for two properties there, the former Uncle Billy's Hilo Bay Hotel and the former Country Club Condominium Hotel. And we have submissions that we're evaluating now and hope to make a decision on soon. Those are the two most problem properties probably in that area.
So you feel you're making adequate progress so that there is no need to create this redevelopment authority, or?
That's correct. That's basically our view.
Thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions? Representative McKelvey.
DLNR, real quickly, before are they still there?
Yes.
Hard to see this. I mean, to follow up on the last line of questioning, you know, the mission of the agency of DLNR is conservation, is it not? It's conservation, it's resource protection, it's redevelopment seems to be, I mean, something that a redevelopment agency would be perfect for, insofar as balancing all the different kinds of uses go far beyond the scope of DLNR. I mean, doesn't the redevelopment authority make sense, especially since the local community also has more input as to what's going on?
So, yeah, we do have kind of different aspects to the departmental mission, but generating revenue is one of them, and that's what we do at Land Division. The revenue we generate goes to, in part, to support the operations of the department so they can perform their conservation functions. So we do have experience in leasing and development. We have the East Kapolei lands in Honolulu that we're working on, as well as a development on Maui for an industrial park. So we do have experience in this, and we think we can address the situation at Banning Drive in Hilo.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying you do, but I think a redevelopment agency also would put more of the input in the local community level, wouldn't it? I mean, DLNR is statewide focus in this area of conservation resources, et cetera.
Yeah, we do have, there is a Banning Drive Hawaii redevelopment agency that was created, you know, at the county level, which was doing some planning efforts in this area, but its problem was it did not have funding. But we do have a couple of members from that agency serving on the evaluation committee for our RFP.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to House Bill 203 relating to water storage and distribution systems for certain agricultural land in Wahiawa. First up, we have Kalani Fronda, Office of Foreign Affairs.
Aloha, Chair Nakashima.
Aloha.
Vice Chair Matayoshi and members of the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Kalani Fronda, Land Director with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We stand on our testimony in strong support of HB 203 with comments. I would like to highlight that approval of this bill will position the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to enhance our state's food security and climate resiliency while providing protection and preservation of the sacred and culturally irreplaceable Kukani local birthing stones. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify our strong support of HB 203.
Thank you very much. James Nakatani, Agribusiness Development Corp. Alan Downer, DLNR.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alan Downer. I'm the Administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. The department stands on its written testimony in support.
Thank you very much. And that is all the testifiers we have on this measure. Members, any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to HB 1012 related to rentals for public land leases. Ian Hirokawa, DLNR.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Ian Hirokawa is tied up on another matter. So this is Kevin Moore at Land Division. Again, and the department will stand on its written testimony in strong support of this measure. We're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Okay. Okay, we are at the end of the agenda. Recess for decision making. Recess. Okay, members, thank you for your patience. House Bill 1356 relating to agriculture. The chair had a discussion with the maker of the bill, and what I suggested to them is that they come up with a resolution to resolve outstanding concerns with the bill, and so we will defer this matter. House Bill 22, campaign finance. In accordance with the campaign spending commission's testimony, we will retain language from HRS 11-391B. That's the $5,000 fine. There's also a obsolete reference on page 3, line 4, and on page 4, line 5. We need to change the disclaimer to notice. This bill is already defect dated, so no other changes are needed. Members, any questions or comments?
Chair?
Yes.
Campaign spending said clearly, rather clearly, they don't need the bill because it's all covered. So what is added on, what they say is, or what do you say is not in there? I'm not clear on that.
Well, what I changed was a portion that was removed from the bill, from the statute, and putting it back.
Okay,
but the other changes remain.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Takumi.
I support your recommendation, Chair. I appreciate it. I introduced about 24 bills. This is the only bill that was scheduled. So I appreciate it. You didn't get the memo from leadership, so I appreciate your passing the bill.
That one must have snuck through.
Sorry about that.
Members, any other questions or concerns? Not as amended. Vice Chair.
The Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 22HD1 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ichiyama. Aye. Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Lopresti.
Aye. Sorry. Aye.
Representative Lowen.
Aye.
Representative McKelvey.
Aye.
Representative Nakamura.
Aye.
Representative Takumi. Aye. Representative Todd.
Aye.
Representative Tokioka.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
And Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, House Bill 157, public agency meetings. I'm on page 1, line 16, item 3 number 3 should be underlined. The bill is already defect dated, and I do recommend technical amendments for clarity, style, and composition. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, as amended, Vice Chair.
The Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 157 HD1 with amendments noting the presence of all members, any members voting with reservations. Any members voting no. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. House Bill 570 relates to sexual abuse. I'd like to adopt the AG's amendments on page 7 and page 5. The bill is already defect dated, so we will add technical amendments for clarity and style. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
The Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 570 HD1 with amendments noting the presence of all members, any members voting with reservations. Any members voting no. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 6 674, electioneering. Chair's recommendations passing this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Ward.
Sure, there's got to be a better way than the way it is, but it's halfway from being too strict and then too much money, the small amounts of monies that are being reported. So I'm going to go with reservations. Hopefully it'll shape up and not be taking all of us out of there, but also making it easier for the campaign spending to report. As I said earlier, some people put a Facebook ad and they got to put all this $8.95, $10.50 small manini amounts, and there should be an easier way for both them as well as candidate committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any comments, questions? If not, Vice Chair.
The chair's recommendation is to pass. Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 674 as is, noting the reservations of Representative Ward. Any other members voting with reservations? Any other members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 63, non-general funds. The bill is already defect dated. Chair's recommendation is passing out as is. Members, questions or concerns? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 63 HD1 as is. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay. House Bill 569 related to procurement. Chair notes that they're on page 5, line 9, it should be absolute privilege. And so we'll make that addition. Otherwise, the bill is defective and Chair's recommendation is passing it out as amended. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 569 HD1 with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no?
Chair, sorry, just the chair had mentioned a different bill than the one we're voting on. The chair's comments were on HB 526, not on HB 569, which we're voting on.
So I believe we're on HB 569 relating to victim counselor privilege.
Yeah, but the chair was talking about procurement stuff, which is the next. Is it in there? Oh, what do I know? Okay, sorry, I'm not paying attention. My bad. I'm up.
Okay, Representative Presley gets the prize for being awake.
I think the amendments we have to 569 though, right?
Yeah, I think I just had the title wrong.
Yeah, I think you might have just had the title wrong. Official sanctions for Representative Opresti.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, 569, sorry. Related to victim counselor privileges. So yeah, page 5, line 9, absolute privilege bill is already defect dated. So as amended. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 569 HD1 with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. HB 526 relating to procurement. It's already defect dated. Chair's recommendation pass it out as is. The members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 526 HD1 as is. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
HB 541 relating to health. Chair's recommendation is to pass this out as is. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 541 HD1 as is, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, HB 541 or 545? 545. 545, Hawaiian Homes Commission Act as is. Any questions, comments? Okay, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 545 HD1 as is, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, House Bill 972 related to contested cases. Chair's recommendation is that we adopt the LUC's recommended amendment, Section 2, Paragraph C, delete requirements that the location of the parties and their attorneys be noticed. And also technical amendments for clarity and style. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, with amendments.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 972 with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, members, House Bill 103, House Draft 1 relating to emergency powers. Chair's recommendation is to pass this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 103 HD1 as is. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, House Bill 7 through 6 relate to face coverings. Chair's recommendation is that we pass this with amendments for technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Otherwise, no other recommendations. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Board.
Question, Chair, regarding the small businesses and the HFIA suggested amendment. They fear they're going to be the mass police if we don't put them into this bill. That could be an issue that we have to face, or something you might put in the committee report or whatever, but I can see how they've got enough problems without having to be mass police, which I think is...
Yes, yeah. Yeah, the chair's suggestion on that is that in the committee report that we note that it may be necessary to uncover your face temporarily to confirm identification, and may be necessary, and
private businesses, Chair?
Indicate in the committee report that it may be necessary to uncover your face to confirm identification.
But right now, it only says it's necessary in public. It doesn't say in private establishments. I think that was the point of the HFIA amendment, wasn't it? In other words, what you just said applies to basically the public mandate that this says. But as Victor Lim, the rest, the McDonald's guy and the others were saying, in our restaurant, we have to say, put it on, and we have to enforce it. And that's what the basic amendment was about. Which means right now, this only covers the public, in public. It doesn't cover in establishments. Or am I misreading it?
Should we let Representative Ichiyama introduce her response?
Representative Ichiyama.
Representative of the Ward, the language regarding small businesses is in the current emergency proclamation. So this would just put into session law the current emergency proclamation. So businesses are currently required to do this.
So that's in a separate setup rather than this bill. So what I'm just mentioning is covered in this different proclamation, not in this one.
Yes, it's covered in the emergency
Okay.
proclamation.
So the testifiers who said we don't want to be the mask police, we should have told them that they're actually not having to do that given this other proclamation.
No,
Anyway, that's an issue that I think we have to
Already
keep down the
I
road.
think they should talk to the governor if they want that changed.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Sure.
Okay, members and
Chair, I have a
Representative Presti.
Thank you. I'm in strong support of the bill. I would make a friendly amendment or ask it to be entered into the committee report. The sunset date of the end of this calendar year. So it would end whichever comes first, that or the last proclamation. If in a bad scenario, something this continues on unforeseeably, it might be more wise to have the sunset date at the beginning of the next legislative session, just in case we got to pick it up again. So I would just ask that the chair consider maybe putting that in the committee report. So that way the intent it carries over in case we have to revisit it. Otherwise, I'm strong support of this.
Okay, we will put notation in the committee report.
Thanks.
To consider extending it to January 31st. Give the legislature another crack at it or they come back. Members, any other questions or concerns? Okay, you represent McKelvey.
I'll be supporting the recommendation of the chair on the bill. I just wanted to flag, just the don't need to put it in the committee report, but more of just an open question. Is it the termination of the gouge protection for the PPE makers? It's tied to a hurricane exemption in 127A-30 subsection C. So maybe in the future, just maybe as the bill goes to the Senate, it can be looked at. So thanks, Chair, but appreciate you moving the measure.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Not Vice Chair.
All right, Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 726 HD1 with amendments noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Okay, noting reservations, Representative Ward. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no?
No vote.
Okay, no vote from Representative Kobayashi. Any other members voting no? All right, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 724, Emergency Management. The chair would like to amend item number 23 to include wife. I can't even read what I wrote. Representative Tokioka, can you help me?
Sure. Wi-Fi, television network connection, and programming. And then in sector, you're gonna just make it plural.
Okay.
So the television network would include dish network and cable installers. During the beginning of the pandemic, they weren't essential, and every time they had to go travel, they had to get a permit on Kauai and other islands.
Okay. So with those amendments and other technical amendments for clarity, style, and consistency, members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair with amendments.
The chair's recommendation is to pass HB 724 HD1 with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Tomorrow, we are holding budget hearings with judiciary and OHA. However, there will be no votes. So, and we'll do voting next week. Okay.
Chair, what about the last three?
Oh, do we?
Another page.
Yeah, you got it.
Number page 5.
The housekeeping bill.
Triple refer deadlines tonight.
You know, I'm not advocating for staying longer.
Just testing you guys, testing you. Pass.
You see it took over.
I
See what you
know.
did.
Seeing if Lopresti's away, you know.
Okay, sorry. Jumped the gun. 467 relate to public lands. Chair's recommendation, just pass this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Lowen.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I just question the need to implement this statewide as opposed to just narrowing it down to Waiakea Peninsula. I think it might raise some concerns about what the intent is, whether that's founded or not. It just raises questions. So for now, I'm going to go WR.
Okay. We will put the language into the committee report indicating that the intent of this is for Waiakea Peninsula.
Chair,
Representative Lopresti.
same concern and the reservations for me also.
Okay.
But that's why I wasn't going to remind you about it. I was like, we're done. That's fine.
All right, thank you. Members, any other questions or concerns? Okay, if not, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 467 HD1 as is, noting the reservations of Representatives Lopresti and Lowen. Any other members voting with reservations? Any other members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, HB 203, House Draft 1 relating to water storage and distribution systems for certain agriculture land in Wahiawa, Oahu. Chair's recommendation is that we pass this out as is. Members, any questions or concerns? Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 203 HD1 as is. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, HB 1012 HD1 related to rentals for public land lease. Chair's recommendations that we also pass this out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, WR.
WR.
Any other questions or comments? Not Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1012 HD1 as is, noting the reservations of Representative McKelvey. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. We are adjourned.